Good evening and welcome to Realty Coffee Talk. My name is Tahir Qureshi. I'm your host tonight. With me is my honorable guest, Dan Brewer. He's a past president of Real Estate Institute, Appraiser Institute of Canada. And I'm going to introduce you to him. Dan, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is Dan Brewer. I am a senior appraiser consultant with Appraisers Canada. We have offices in Richmond Hill and Barrie, and we are serving throughout the Ontario area for over 35 years. We have two offices that are serving the York region and the Simcoe County area specifically, but we go all over the province.
Fantastic. The topic of today is capital planning, condos, and reserve fund studies. When it comes to capital planning and goals of capitals or planning process, what is required in order to do a proper capital planning and how you do it for a project?
No problem. Well, certainly within the Ontario marketplace, there are a couple sectors actually that are mandatory. So certainly the condominium industry, under the Condominium Act, it requires to have reserve fund planning created. With cooperatives and not-for-profits and other government organizations, capital funding requirements are also required and completed very often. They follow a process, if you will, a methodology that is about putting away a dollar for a rainy day. So it's those funds that will be available for future funding of major components that will fail over time. And so certainly that's how the plan is done. It's obviously lots of mathematics and formulas, but at the end of the day, it is there to ensure there's adequate funding for those things that you will have to replace over a period of time.
Is this something that you do it at the beginning of a project, or is it something that you already have a project, or is project completed and then it converts into other research studies? We're going to talk about that. At what stage that you do this capital planning, and how you allocate funds for it, and what it takes, the whole process, who are involved with it? Because I think they got to have some kind of qualification, and you have lots of them. Can you tell us your designation that you have that qualify you to conduct these studies?
Absolutely. So certainly within the concept of competency, the Real Estate Institute of Canada has a designation, the CRP, so the Certified Reserve Fund Planning designation. Mm-hmm. Also, the Appraisal Institute of Canada, also with their designations, they also have the same qualifications to be able to do that. Both organizations work together through the education process to acknowledge the competency. The whole aspect of when it should be done is a really good question, because we have the ideal scenario would be done at the beginning. So if it's a new project and you're starting from scratch, you can plan to be able to put capital funds away early on in that process. The requirements don't always get looked at by boards or property management firms until several years into it. And that's probably not the ideal situation, because certainly the newer the project, the sooner you get on board with doing it, the better off you're going to be with having funds available when something fails. And it will fail. There's no question that things do fail.
So the owner of the project is the one who makes the decision of conducting this capital planning, because they need to invest money and come up with a strategy to manage the risk involved with the project. Is it a tool of a decision making part of the management to have this study done, so make sure they invest money in the project, or is something they set aside funding for continuing growth or expansion of the projects?
So with respect to who should do it, certainly within the condominium world, the actual developer is responsible initially until it's transferred to the board of directors from the corporation. Ultimately, the developer is responsible to do that. Ideally, obviously, would be to have that done just as occupancy is going to take place, so that everyone is on board with respect to the level of funding that would be required. They do make estimates, they do make calculations. The one thing that the CRP designated member brings and the AACI member brings is they're neutral and unbiased to this equation. They're not going to fix any problem. They're going to identify it, but certainly they're not there to fix the problem. They're there to identify the problem within the planning report. And so certainly early on in a developer situation, they would be doing it for sure.
So that means when most likely it is a multi-residential properties, commercial plazas, commercial condominiums, retail plazas, and high-rise buildings. Those are the people that normally use this the capital planning for the funding. Obviously, you have to plan things. What you want to do it is part of kind of viability study, like a feasibility study. When they go to the bank and say, "Hey, give me money," do I have to have this capital planning sort of a documented part of the feasibility study to justify cost of doing a project? Is that something?
No, that wouldn't necessarily be when you would do it, but certainly the concept of having one done is probably the most important part to give the confidence to the people who buy that this project's going to be well managed and well maintained throughout the initial stages of develop, or the initial first few years that you have the development. It certainly would be incumbent upon the board of directors and the property management firms to ensure that they're done. That's one of the, I think, the sort of the things that can be gapped and not done. They don't do them as often as they should. You mentioned about commercial, industrial, all of those aspects in the condominium part of it. There's also vacant land condominiums, also common element condominiums. And that's just one sector of the capital reserve requirement process. Not-for-profit, cooperatives, government, many other organizations, pension funds, REITs, the program that is used with respect to reserve fund planning can be applied across the board. The condominium market is forced to do it here in Ontario because of the Condominium Act, but certainly there are many other opportunities for it to be done.
So when it comes to, so basically the planning aspect of it to prepare the board of directors of a condominium corporation or the management to understand the process, what it takes to consider all elements. I think it's not just the property; it's a financial aspect. That maybe organization is involved to make sure they are adequately staffed to manage the resources they have, and to make funding commitment as well, to make sure that this project completes when you are planning. So that's an aspect of it. So now we're going to move to this condominium. What type of condominium that you think, as a CRP, which is very prestigious designation of Real Estate Institute of Canada? I'm also fellow of Real Estate Institute of Canada and certified real estate specialist with our institute, which focus on giving, focus on a higher education, new skill set, and they create a benchmark, and they've been in business educating higher designation since 1955. It's over 65 years. It's unbelievable that how much effort they have done to improve this higher education standards and programs. So I'm very glad that you are both of us are member of Real Estate Institute of Canada.
Certainly, the other aspect is that when you have a program that is not only accepted but respected throughout the profession, it has much greater impact when you're dealing with a property owner or a property manager in the aspect of, is the person competent to do this type of work?
Obviously, it brings you the credibility, credibility of the institution that supports you, that you are a member, you have passed all the exam and you are qualified and you deserve to be recognized and valued. So now I'm going to come to you is that in terms of condominium, most average Joe person talk about the apartment building as a condominium, but there are commercial condominium. I do not know about the plaza. Is plaza is a condominium or they are treated as a one building? And
there are
what
some.
are the type of condominium that you are dealing with that you can share the knowledge with our audience, viewers who are watching television?
Certainly within the concept of when you can see them everywhere, many of them are mixed use. And you have the retail, you have office, and you have the residential, all built into one. And certainly those condominiums, if there's a condominium registration attached to it, it requires the skill set of having a reserve fund plan put in place. The plan itself, whether it's done for the initial board of directors, the property management firms, generally will have in place within a very short period of time good staff, good people to recognize that they need to have these type of services. But as far as property types are concerned, the condominium world, there is so many different types now. So you mentioned residential, there is commercial, there's mixed use, industrial. It covers the gamut as far as the property types. Many properties have been condominiumized.
Yeah. So now in terms of the reserve fund, there are three classes of reserve funds. And we want you to explain one step at a time so we know what are these classifications. And my understanding is the first classification is when you are starting a condominium brand new, you have to do that.
That is correct. And so the first type of report is a comprehensive study. So that is the full-blown sort of narrative type analysis, full in-depth component. That is the initial report that you would do for anyone who has never had one done. It's a very complex document. In many cases, the reserve fund planner is going to go to a board meeting and go to the property management firms to be able to explain what's in fact in the report. So that's the initial part of it. The second part is the update study based upon an on-site inspection. So 3 years, typically, 3 years after, you could do an on-site inspection, or you can do an update study without an on-site study, assuming that things haven't changed.
We're going to go into that, but the question I have for you is that the Condominium Act requires these studies, correct? Or is this something new legislation?
It is correct. You are 100% correct. The condominium legislation requires it to be completed.
So normally what are element, give them a little bit elaborate, what are the element, for example, physical assessment, inspection method, equipment that you use, what you do, and how much it costs for people, because there could be some property owners watching this, they might need your services. So it's important for people to know, because it's very unusual for someone to come into and be present and giving advice and giving a description about what's going on. And my understanding a little bit was that approximately 3% of the budget is considered as appropriate allocation of reserve funds, approximately, something like that.
There's lots of rules of thumb. I've heard 3, I've heard 2, I've heard 10. It certainly is the old school of thinking. That's why the Real Estate Institute of Canada has created the CRP designation, and the member who is able to not guess whether it's 3% or 5% or 10, but it will be calculated based upon the formulas that are utilized. The typical property owner of a condominium doesn't necessarily realize there's a lot of common elements. So a lot of those common elements that are common to all are certainly part of the assets of the condominium, as well as the major components, the roof, the paving, windows, carpets, security systems, and the like.
Your mechanical system, electrical system, elevator, interior finishes, they're all common elements.
In many cases, they are, in fact, common element, and they are not part of the unit boundary measurements, and the unit owner is responsible for what's inside his unit typically. But we have seen declarations that have been amended and changed in such a way that may be detrimental to, in fact, a project.
So basically, what you are saying is that when the house is built, there is expectancy of life of the building. Those are the infrastructure that you have. Then you have components, the systems that may not have the same lifespan. For example, heating and cooling system or the boiler, they might have a different lifespan and they require maintenance. And as they wear down, economy and energy could be an issue because you are burning more electricity or using some energy, gas, and you need to optimize it, bring more efficient systems to update and keep the value of the property. Is that some of those things that you discuss in the report?
It's an excellent point you make, because certainly the aspect of the life cycle analysis of the major components of any building or facility it has a life cycle. And as a result of that, and you've made it very clear, some things last longer than other things. And as a result of that, that's the expertise of bringing in a certified reserve planner to do that age life analysis of those components. So that's done through an observation process.
Yeah, I remember that when I came to Canada in 1990, I bought my first condominium, and I stayed there for probably a year or so. Then I moved to Mississauga, and they were doing balconies. There were problems with the balconies, and they were replacing it before the city gave them a work order. But a couple of units beside where I used to live in Kipling area, the city issued a order because there were problem with the load bearing. Something was wrong, so they have to reinforce the lifting of the entire building basically. And they did a special assessment actually over and above the reserve fund, because the repair work required was a lot more than funding they have allocated under the reserve study. So they have to charge each one $6,000 front money plus $500 to $600 per month for several years to pay for it. So property value really went down because of that, and I think it lasted for a long time actually. 5 years or 6 years, and property value now appreciated a little bit more. It's been almost 20 years when this happened, 22 years ago. So when you are, can you explain to us the component of your reserve study? What are the step-by-step that these are included so people get educated that you are specialized? And when somebody asks for a little money and they want you to give you discount to them, they tell them your time values because you are helping them to preserve the integrity of the infrastructure and the value of the house or the building. So they should value and appreciate your effort and the time, because they don't, when you do a lot of work from the home or from your office, they don't see physical work that you're supposed to be doing. You go visit, you take pictures, you take analysis, you take scanners, blah, 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 but you come back and analyze and put together the report, correct? Is this how you do it?
You have a good comprehension of what is done. What is also added to that process is the knowledge and skill set of that person who is doing that. And so you make a very good point. The report itself and the methodologies and the process, you create a document which has standards and has credibility so that anyone who reads it will understand where the consultant is coming from. However, the value of what one brings to the table is that ability to understand all of the components. And there is various components that many people may not realize are part of that process. So for example, some declarations that describe, say, the windows, but what they didn't identify was caulking. And so caulking, while it's not part of the window component, it is something that has to be addressed within the concept of the common element. There are many, many things, either small or large, as far as components of a building are concerned, that may in fact be identified within the declaration, within the condominium documentation of what is a common element and what is not owned by the unit owners. That is certainly very critical to the process because it's important that we recognize what the condominium corporation is responsible for. So it is a very in-depth analysis for sure.
So based on your experience, you're the very highly qualified person that I ever heard. I look at your designations, there's a big list. I can't even pronounce all of them. I'm very happy that you came on board and you're giving your valuable time to our audience. And I'm also thankful to John Bowen, the president of REIC Toronto chapter, to arrange this, our meeting on this show. So when the people, is there an experience where you have been invited for the studies or people have asked for your opinion, but they decided not to do it and they end up being charged by the city of not having funds and they run into trouble? Because you are doing a prevention, actually. Doing a reserve study is a prevention. So, as construction material deteriorate at a period of time, and certain things are recommended by caulking, for example, you mentioned that. Caulking is very essential because the water leakage comes right from the windows and doors. If you don't do the proper caulking and after maybe 2-3 years, the flexibility of the caulking that fills the gap around the windows or doors really turn down the cracks. I think that company called Tramco was the one that doing the caulking, I believe. I don't know who's caulking you guys use. Tramco is one of the big company, I believe.
One of the things that as a unit owner, a condominium owner, or a cooperative owner, it doesn't really matter. One of the things that we have learned as far as part of the process, and you're 100% correct, it is a preventative process. Yeah. And what we're seeing now is it can be done in a couple different stages. We recognize that, so for example, I do property condition assessments as well, and they may be something that are done prior to a capital reserve plan or a reserve fund study. They may in fact be something that will identify that problem and then be able to put a plan in place to help ensure that there's protection for that property, for those components, for those unit owners as you go forward.
So basically, if we have investors, because as you know, I am also real estate broker of record, I have my own brokerage. So when investor is looking to buy and invest money to buy a property, condominium, commercial, residential, or whatever, or townhomes, row homes, and commercial or residential, what he's looking for, that to feel comfortable that I should invest in this property, regardless of financial income and the profitability or cap rate in the property, but they are looking to see if it's properly managed. The condominium or if it's I'm talking about commercial because private condominiums are the homeowners are the directors except the property manager, correct?
Yeah, the commercial markets probably are even both commercial and industrial are very much equally important to be relied on by an investor, because those things that are mismanaged or not maintained or not repaired at some point in the future is going to be impacted. And I can think of, you can patch a roof and you can patch asphalt and you can patch a lot of things, but there is a day reckoning where you have to do it all. And that's where some of the older stuff is, they've patched and patched long enough.
Yeah, those are cosmetic, cosmetic stuff that to look good. But if it can carry the load or is, because I have told many people, the water is the biggest problem that we ever have. If you have a roof on your head and then roof is not leaking in the house, when there is a leakage on the roof inside the house, everything gets destroyed very quickly.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Sometimes it's from the roof or from the ground. That we have water coming from both ways sometimes.
Both ways. Because, I'm giving an example of it. The water roofing is because water is coming all the way inside, is destroying everything. Or in the basement, if there is water leakage or water pipe burst in the house and a thing like that, it can burst anywhere, condominium. So now a question I have for you is, when you're doing the reserve study, mostly utilities are underground now, and particularly the high-rise building, commercial building, high underground. So how the reserve study is handled those utilities that are underground? Do you hire engineers and consulting engineers, part of your mechanical, electrical, and all those structural people as a part of your reserve study, or is strictly part of the financial matter?
So depends, because you could bring in those professions if you saw or identified something that was beyond the norm. However, you mentioned about the underground services. So every common element, condominium, the roads, the streets, the asphalt, the curbs, underground wiring, all of those things, sewers, all of that stuff, has a life cycle. It has a life cycle, and the life cycle analysis through industry recognized tables, there's many of them that are out there. And we rely on those. We rely on those tables to tell us, something like that will last X number of years. Might be 10, might be 30, might be 40, whatever the number is, based upon the tables that are industry acknowledged, that are accepted in the industry for various different components of whether underground or a building.
One of the thing that I always felt is going to the parking lot in the basement when you have HVACs, big fans running there, and sometimes it smells. So there's too much carbon monoxide, and many other things involved. And so when you guys are doing study, you are also hiring some architect. I know a couple of engineering companies that I work with. They do assessment and they recommend replacement of the units, and there's an annual maintenance overhaul. So could you break down us a little bit the step that you take to do complete study so people can appreciate and understand what takes to do a study and how long it takes to do the study, and eventually approximately cost of a study? So give us a step by step. That way we can say, okay, first you go to the site, you bring people, tools that you bring in, or collect information, or you ask them to give you information. You do your data research before you go to the site. How you do that? So can you give us a little bit more?
I will try and give you through that process. When we have the go ahead to do a file and it's a green light go, there are many things that we ask of the property management firm to provide. So there may be service contracts that are in place by various service providers. Could be the HVAC people, could be plumbing, it could be the fire suppression people, it could be the electrical people. So all of those agreements, service agreements, become very critical in asking for that information so that I can assess whether or not the components are being maintained to a reasonable level. Yep. So I make that assessment based upon the information that is available. If nothing is available, that tells me something. We know that we have someone not maintaining stuff that they should be maintaining. So that's part of that process. And then, of course, physically, when I come on site, I'm basically looking at every major component and minor components that are common element and not owned by the unit owners. And that may include recreation facilities, that may include various other components that are part of the condominium. So physically, the on-site inspection becomes a very critical part. So you mentioned the smell, you mentioned that, and certainly the expertise of the smells and the sights and the touching and the looking of those components become very critical as we go forward. So I come on site, we look at those things, we assess them, we do take pictures, as you mentioned. In some cases, we video things because it sometimes tells a better story if there's a larger magnitude of an issue. From there, once we gather that information up, we then have the onerous task of now going to all those industry accepted table process and find out what that age life cycle is for the various components: sidewalks, roof, paving, windows, hallway carpet, elevators, you name it, any component. And there are hundreds or dozens of components. So there's, to simply say one or two, it's, the big stuff we know: the roof, the windows, the boilers, the carpets, fire suppression, security systems, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But the length of time to then research, combine all that with our age life. So now we know, and I'll give you an example. Let's say that the carpet, we'll just pick something simple. The carpet is 5 years old and it's expected to have, say, a 10 or 12-year life, but it's beat up, it's dirty, no one ever cleans it. So it may very well have reached the end of its economic life cycle, and that recommendation will be put in place. The costing of all those components is the single largest part of that process. So we take all of that information, we then use spreadsheets and formulas to project. It's called a benchmark analysis, and we project what dollars would be spent over a period of time. And knowing that we have a 30-year horizon, that's what is recommended. Sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 10, but a 30-year horizon, and then what could be fixed or required to be fixed through that process. As a result of that, the inspection of the components, as well as the financial part of the process and the age life part of the process, is fundamentally makes up what the job really is. It's a fairly in-depth analysis. You mentioned about what would it take. These documents are hundreds of pages in many cases, and they can take several weeks to complete. And as far as fees are concerned, it depends on the size of the project, but I've seen fees anywhere from $2,500 to as high as $25,000. It depends on what size and what level of project we're dealing with, but it's a very intensive, very comprehensive analysis.
Yeah. So in my opinion, that if you have you are an owner or investor or buyer or whatever, and if you want to buy the property, you will say, show me your reserve fund study. I need to make sure that things that they are telling me for a marketing point of view, that report will tell me if there are any weaknesses or things that needs to be corrected. They have not done it. It gave me a good start. I will demand that, because it gave me a level of comfort that they hired someone and did a good study, and now they're implementing that study, what was done.
It's important to recognize the status certificate does have a note. So does the financial statements, has a note with respect to the reserve fund. But you have hit it on the head. It's very critical to have someone knowledgeable who understands what that report is really saying. And I know as a real estate broker, you certainly put clauses in to ensure that the reserve, the documents, the declaration and documents, and bylaws and reserve, all that stuff is looked at. But sometimes it's not always looked at by someone who is duly qualified to do so. And so that's where, expertise of someone like myself comes into play.
No, it's amazing, because I love to get involved do as much as possible to make sure that my client is informed before he or she can make a decision, or a corporation head. Uh, Everything that needs to be done has to be done. Is a part of our, under Real Estate Business Broker Act now, is a Teresa, Section 21, talk about material facts, finding material facts. What's wrong with this property, or what is good thing about the property, to make sure you have done your due diligence. And as a part of status certificate, which is a very common practice, to get a couple of hundred pages of papers and look through all the financial side. The financial side is good, but I am acquiring, or my client is buying a property. Property has a structure, is exterior, which is visible. But there are elements, mechanical room, the age of the boiler, HVAC system is a centralized. There are big fan in the basement, where we have a 3-level parking. Those, each fan can cost you $100,000, just one fan.
Correct.
So there are many of those areas. If your study has some information there, I might be able to prevent a couple of $100,000 from my client, or at least prepare them to heads on. There's a possibility, because there could be some manipulation possible, because it's a private business. And as a prudent representative of the buyer, I will try to get information and pass it on to, maybe not you if you do it, but we give it to somebody else who is a CRP, to make sure there's a point of view. Remember, when we get sick, we go to one doctor, say, let me go to another doctor to get an opinion, right? So if you are spending $15, $20, $30 million, if it costs another $10,000 to get another second opinion about the property, may not be a bad idea, right?
It's very interesting. And I think the due diligence part of the process, whether you're buying 1 unit or 150 units, I think the due diligence is probably underestimated on the impact of what it could be.
Yes.
I think there are many projects that are not as well funded as they should be. Some of it is self-infliction by owners who don't want to see a reserve, their premiums go up, or their payments go up. In some cases, it's property management firms who are trying to stay in place in their situation. And in some cases, we have boards that really have no knowledge. And I think that's the sad reality that we have, where we have unit owners who may know nothing about what the reserve fund requirements may be, why it's needed, why you have it in place. I was just told a story here just the other day of a young guy who was doing reserve fund work, and it was made up of primarily of mature people, we'll say, who own the units. And so he made the point of asking, did you understand, or do you know what a reserve fund is supposed to do? And they fully admitted they had no clue. And so he was able to attend their board meeting, and help educate the unit owners and the board through that process, because they were really not adequately funding their investment. And I think that's where people sometimes forget.
Yeah, I will point out to you, because I know my sister-in-law one time, she was a director of one of the condominium in Donsview many years ago. And she was very young person, and she was very optimistic to make a difference. And she really shook up our directors, because most of the owner in a residential 9-to-5 job, they're tired, they go back and they just attend. The property manager will fix their plumbing, and any problem in the house, they don't bother them. So this is how everything works, is the property manager look after the directors, and the rest of the people have a problem. So if a small company have too many projects, too many property management, they don't have adequate staff to look after their business, which they have been bestowed upon the trust to handle, there is a problem. I hope it's not very frequent, but it's happening. And you very fairly pointed out that lack of interest, lack of dedication and commitment on the part of the board of directors, and lack of knowledge is the reason. And this is why, professional as you are, member of REIC and the CRP, and former president of Appraiser Institute of Canada, it's commendable that you are giving a tremendous contribution to your profession, and people are benefiting from it and is value a lot. Like me, I will really appreciate and value your contribution, because you're really keeping the value of the property par with the market condition. Because if you don't invest money to maintain the property, is a prevention is better than fixing it at the end. You're going to cost you more money. So this is very, very important that you share this experience with us. So we are getting close to our program. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to take 1 or 2 minutes to summarize yourself about this process, and also give them your phone number, your email, and your name of the company, so that in case they need you, they will contact you.
Dan? No problem. Well, thank you very much. And certainly it's been a pleasure to be able to talk about something that's so critical to the marketplace, and maybe not as understood as much as it should be. Certainly I have a wonderful passion for the industry. It doesn't seem to wane by my length of time being in it. I have been with Appraisers Canada for over 30 years. I've been in the business for 42 years. We do the property condition assessment. We do capital reserve planning. We do the replacement cost analysis, real estate valuations of all types and litigation, machinery and equipment valuations, and certainly the aspect of reserve planning, as we have talked about tonight, is a very critical part of the economic well-being of any property. My company is Appraisers Canada. My name is Dan Brewer. Appraise@appraiserscanada.com is an email address that can reach me. Also, appraiserscanada.com is our web address, and 905-884-5499 is a phone number that will be able to reach us. Thank you very much. A great evening. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Dan, for your present. Now, my viewers, this is Realty Coffee Talk. Tahir Qureshi, your host from Awaz Entertainment, broadcast in Canada and around the world. Today, you have learned about the importance of capital planning, type of condominium, and reserve funds from the guru of the Real Estate Institute, Real Estate Institute of Canada, as well as Appraiser Institute of Canada, Dan Brewer. It's very, very important for you to understand when you are investing money or buying a condominium, whether it is small, large, commercial, or residential. These are very essential, important information that you need to know when you're dealing with realtors or dealing with your board of directors. You may ask them, have they done the reserve study when you are entering into a new condominium? Is required is called study number 1, case 1, is required when you start a new condominium. Then second one, I think this study is very comprehensive, good for 6 years, but then there are studies done after 3 years interval. Some requires physical visit to the site, and some requires just the update by the person who authored the first report. So I hope that you had the opportunity to learn some skill. If you have any questions about appraisal or reserve fund study, you may contact me or Dan Brewer. We're more than happy to help you. Before I end my program, I take this opportunity on behalf of Awaz Entertainment Television Show and Realty Coffee Talk. We want to thank our health specialists, doctors, scientists, engineers, nurses, police officers, who put their life online to defend us, protect us against coronavirus spread, and helping our fellow Canadians We thank you, we salute you, we love you, we respect you, we're there to help you. If you are in your city, there are many people who are affected by coronavirus. Please donate generously to food banks. Mississauga Real Estate Board is supporting Mississauga Food Bank. So if you are a realtor or you're a consumer living in Mississauga, please do donate to Mississauga Bank. I thank you very much for watching. May God bless you. Thank you, Dan, and may God bless you all. May God bless Canada. Thank you. Good night for now.